Hi everyone, this is Joe Crawl with the Society of St. Sebastian, and again, welcome to Pro-Life University. This week's edition, we're going to cover something a little bit different. I actually had a plan to talk about pro-life amendments and some of this other stuff, but then I noticed this article kind of came across my desk all of a sudden, and it dealt with sex trafficking and parental consent laws. And I said, this is what I want to do. So I kind of had to change up my plan here, throw away the other note card, and then come in and talk about this particular issue here. First of all, I want to say congratulations to Florida. Governor Ron DeSantis has indicated he's going to be signing the recently passed parental consent bill, and that's a good thing. One of the things that we really need to understand is when we get into this issue is, and you've heard me say this many, many times before, that the evil of legalized abortion has let loose a Pandora's box, literally a Pandora's box of various awful harms that have penetrated society in a myriad of different ways. And obviously parental consent legislation or even parental notification legislation helps to correct a wrong that has been committed because of legalized abortion. You know, we all, most normal human beings would reasonably agree that, just simply put, a parent should have input to their minor daughter's, medical care, especially if they're going to get invasive surgical procedures such as an abortion. They need to be able to say yes or no. All right. And so this is an important sort of thing. It helps right that harm. But one of the things that we really need to say is that with legalized abortion, some vastly other things, kind of, some things that we didn't know about until, fairly recently in the history of things. And so this is an issue that's kind of dear to me because, one, when I was working on my master's thesis, this was an issue that I kind of covered. I was actually talking about Texas's parental notification law and how it leads to a culture of life. And some of these arguments were some of the issues that I had to deal with in my thesis. But furthermore, I do think that since I lobbied on this law, this was a powerful talking point to talk to legislators about. And I think that more people need to really realize what's going on out here. Before we get started, though, let me just sit there and briefly give you the difference between parental notification on one side and parental consent. One of the things to understand is with a parental notification law, it informs the parent that the minor girl is planning to get an abortion. All right? Usually, in some states it may be 24 hours, in many states it's 48 hours. But nonetheless, they have to be reached by certified mail that their daughter is planning to get an abortion. And at that moment, obviously, mom or dad or both have the opportunity to try to talk to her and obviously tell her, to convince her not to have the abortion. It is a good piece of pro-life legislation. It has helped reduce teen abortion numbers. We know this. We've seen it in Texas. We've seen it in other states and so forth. And the big difference, though, between parental notification and parental consent is this. I mean, it's an obvious difference. Here, the parents get to consent to whether or not their minor daughter has an abortion. Obviously, parental consent is stronger legislation. And again, the numbers seem to indicate that parental consent legislation, since it is stronger, seems to have an effect of reducing the teen abortion numbers even more. So we see more numbers going down as a result of this. Again, those are just some of the basic differences. I know some folks, some of you folks that are out there lobbying on this issue or maybe more familiar with this issue might want to know a little bit about judicial bypass. I'm not going to talk about that particular issue within this video because really that's not the main issue that I'm so much concerned about. I might touch upon it just a little bit, but not too much. But nonetheless, all right, so one, congratulations to Florida because I do think that this is going to have a profound impact. One of the things that I touched upon in my thesis and during my lobbying when talking to legislators as one of the needs to pass this legislation, was in 1998, a study had come out from California. And it basically said that a large chunk of teenage girls that were getting pregnant were getting impregnated by men that were 6 years older than them. And so this was a particular problem. This showed already in many ways kind of a sexual predatory sort of behavior. In many ways, adult men were preying upon these young girls. So it wasn't uncommon for, a 14, 15-year-old girl to get impregnated by a 20 or 21-year-old adult male. Right? And so this is obviously a particular problem. And one of the things that we began to recognize at this point in time is that these people are more prone to want to cover up for their crimes. The simple fact of the matter is that if you have a predator, sexual predator in particular, that's preying on young women in order to satisfy his sexual desires, if you will, and he knows that this is an illegal sort of activity that he's engaging in, he's more likely prone to try to cover up his crimes. We've seen this. In fact, there was a recent South Dakota case where an adult male got a minor pregnant, and in South Dakota there was a parental consent law, so he tried to drive her literally to Colorado in order for her to get an abortion so he could avoid being charged with a crime. Kind of backfired in his face. They unfortunately did get the abortion, but the South Dakota lawmakers were able to retrieve the fetal remains and, obviously proceed with the case to identify him as the father and so forth. But that is an example in which we see a sexual predator trying to avoid his crimes. Right? Now, again, we have plenty of videos here that have been brought about. Lila Rose has certainly done her sting operations where she's posed as a minor, posed as someone who's being human trafficked, a minor being human trafficked, and so forth. And we have, literally evidence before our very eyes and ears, if you will, where we hear, people at abortion clinics trying to guide the minor through, how they can get this abortion, and literally no one gets punished for it and so forth. So, these are troubling times. And one of the things that we fundamentally need to understand when it comes to this issue is that when we talk about parental consent legislation, yes, one of the main points of it is to help restore this idea of the principle of subsidiarity. And for those of you who are not familiar with the principle of subsidiarity, the idea is basically this, that a higher order of the community should not infringe upon a lower order of the community if that lower order is functioning just fine and well. So, for example, if there's no evidence of child abuse, the local government has no business coming in, breaking in, and then ripping the children away and basically trying to make a charge of child abuse if there's no evidence of that whatsoever. You let the family do their job. And here's the same sort of thing. All right? It's not the state that gives permission for the girl to get an abortion. It really should rely upon the parents in this instance. And again, we know in many, many cases, parents just simply say, no, we will figure out a way. We will help raise this child. We will give this child up for adoption, but this child deserves a right to life. Again, this idea that the lower order and the lowest order of the society, really being the family, has the right to function in a proper way, and the state should not interfere with that. And so that's one of the big reasons why we have this sort of legislation. But we can also certainly say, when it comes to this sort of legislation, it has another sort of effect, and that is that when parents have to be informed, not just informed, but even have to give consent to an abortion, this helps drive these numbers down, and it helps prevent these cases of sexual predators preying upon young minors. Right? The simple fact is we know it happens. We've seen it happen. We have video evidence of it, tape-recorded evidence of it, where they're trying to coach a girl, or coach a pimp, if you will, how to get a minor girl an abortion without having to, inform mom or dad. And so it's important to know that this sort of thing has this effect. I mean, South Dakota is a great example. It was, mom and dad had to know and give consent to this. Yet the perpetrator, the predator, literally was willing to drive his underage girlfriend across state lines in order to avoid being responsible for his crime. So we know it has an effect. And I think in many ways, it's great that Florida has passed this sort of legislation. Many of the states, most of the states out there have this sort of thing, either parental notification or parental consent. And I want to say that it's a good law because, one, it helps restore. I think consent does a much better job than notification, but notification is certainly a step in the right direction. It does a good job of bringing that balance back to the family unit, especially consent. Notification is on the way there, but consent is more proper to the family unit and restoring this idea of the principle of subsidiarity, because that was stolen away, if you will, because of legalized abortion. But furthermore, I think it helps protect these minor girls from sexual predators. And the simple fact is if abortion is on demand and you know that there aren't parental notification laws or parental consent laws, a predator is more likely to try to prey on young, innocent, and frankly naive, immature young women who don't have the experience, may not have the intellectual know-how, may honestly think that they're in love with this person, and so succumb to these sorts of predatory advances. And these laws obviously have the effect of reducing that. I think that's one of the big reasons why we really ought to look into these laws, right? And again, when we look at it from just a pure incremental perspective, all right, so we see, for example, and again, when it comes to this issue of incrementalism and helping move public opinion away and limiting a harm, or one of the various harms that abortion has done, we see how it limits a harm, right? One, it helps restore the principle of subsidiarity, and two, it helps stop sexual predators from preying upon young women, young minor women. And furthermore, it begins to show that in some respects that parents do need to consent to this. So abortion isn't as safe as everyone makes it out to be. I know a lot of the abortion industry want to say that it's as safe as pulling a tooth. It's not. It's a major invasive surgical procedure. Things can go wrong, and things can go really wrong. So it certainly gives the image that this is not something that is particularly so safe that parents don't need to be involved. The law certainly gives the impression that parents do need to be involved. And it certainly moves this idea of general opinion away from accepting, the evil law. So we begin to see just that little step there, saying, well, okay, it's not as safe as we made it out to be. Yes, parents do need to be informed of this sort of thing. And two, we don't want sexual predators getting away with their crimes. That's horrible. And we don't want sexual predators preying on minor girls. That's awful, right? So it helps move people towards a culture of life. People begin to see the idea that abortion is wrong, that it's not as safe as the abortion industry tries to make it out to be. And furthermore, they see that with unfettered legalized abortion, there are many harms that have come about, such as parents not being informed and sexual predators preying upon minor girls, right? So we're gradually moving that needle towards a culture of life, if you will. And again, I think it's a wonderful piece of legislation. I think it's going to have a tremendous impact on Florida, and I think it's going to help parents, help restore the duties of parents and so forth. And I think it's going to really help prevent sexual trafficking of minor girls in their state. So kudos to Florida, and thank you for all those pro-life advocates out there. I really appreciate what you did. It's a wonderful thing, and I guess we could say thank you to Governor Ron DeSantis as well. Thank you for for signing this bill, or getting ready to sign this bill, and then signing it. just a future thank you. Because I think this will do immeasurable good for your state. It helps bring your state closer to a culture of life, and it helps protect your minor girls, and it helps restore, the proper role of the family. So thank you for signing that law, and thank you, legislators, for passing this bill. I hope you all have a great weekend. Take care, stay safe, and God bless.